Well, it's nice to be here to introduce these guys. Um, Phil Wolfson and Julane Andries are going to talk about MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for anxiety in life-changing illnesses. This has been a soulful day. So much beauty and so much heart. Okay. Phil Wolfson, MD, and his clinical practice with ketamine has informed the development of ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, KAP. He's the principal investigator for a phase 2 MAPS-sponsored, FDA-cleared 18-person study of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for individuals with significant anxiety due to life-threatening illnesses. Phil is a 60s activist, psychiatrist, psychotherapist, writer, practicing Buddhist, and psychonaut who's lived in the Bay Area for 38 years. He is the author of No, N-O-E, a father/son song of love, life, illness, and death. In the 1980s, he participated in clinical research with MDMA when it was still legal. He has been awarded 5 patents for unique herbal medicines. He's a journalist and author of numerous articles on politics, transformation, psychedelics, consciousness, and spirit, and was a founding member of the Hefner Research Institute, well represented here at the conference. Phil is taught in the graduate psychology programs at JFK University, CIIS, the California Institute for Integral Studies, and the UCS, which has the first certificate program for training psychedelic therapists, I think, in the world, if I'm not mistaken. Now it's a relatively new program. And the UCSF School of Medicine Department of Psychiatry. The ketamine papers just published by MAPS provides a definitive view of ketamine's history, science, and therapeutics, and I'm sure it's available at the MAPS bookstore in the marketplace. Julane Andries is a practicing psychotherapist in Marin County, California. She's lived in San Anselmo since 1988, along with her family. She worked in acute care medicine before becoming a marriage and family therapist, and is the principal co-therapist for the MAPS-sponsored MDMA-assisted psychotherapy study for individuals suffering from anxiety with life-threatening illnesses. They recently enrolled the 18th study participant. Julane's work with ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is unique and creative to the psychotherapy process using this medicine. She and her partner, Phil, work with treatment-resistant depression and PTSD. They've created a therapy using the relaxed state that ketamine induces to provide relief of depressive symptoms, insight into individual processing of core issues, and transformation. Julane has a passionate interest in understanding trauma, its impact on the mind and body, and in stimulating the healing process. So please help me welcome this wonderful couple.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's a great honor and privilege to be here. And Neil has cut out about 25 minutes of our 25-minute allowance. So we'll have to rush a bit, but we're grateful for such a wonderful introduction. So the picture you're looking at is a wonderful moment for one of our subjects who was in her second MDMA session and who has had many years, unfortunately, of suffering and difficulty. And she reached this pinnacle moment of liberation and just couldn't help herself, got off our bed and kept doing different postures, and we captured one of her wonderful moments. So this is how good it gets. So I want to just begin by saying great thanks to our progenitor, Sasha Shulgin, who couldn't be here with us, of course, but who really was the instrument, the father, the methodologist, really that brought us all into this possibility of MDMA psychotherapy. And my first experience with Sasha was in 1983. And to Rick Doblin for asking us to do this study, to our co-therapists, to our 2 study coordinators, one of whom is here, to our 18 subjects who have enabled this whole thing to happen and with whom we've had a marvelous experience, to Michael Brafman of the Pine Street Clinic, who's referred to us so many of our patients and enabled us to work quickly through bringing people into the program, to my son Eric, etc. So it all began here about 2 years ago. A vial of 10 grams of MDMA arrived at our place, our home, by FedEx of all things, and it had been manufactured in 1985 by our brother David Nichols. And the main message of this is MDMA is stable like granite. Don't throw away your stash. So a lot of who we are and what has surfaced now in this semi-legal research period came about a long time ago. Really, MDMA came to life in 1978 with Leo Zeff. I came on board with a lot of brothers and sisters here in the early 1980s, and we had a coterie of therapists who really learned a few basic things. That MDMA, which was later called an empathogen, worked in two ways. It enabled us to handle negativities and trauma and difficult feelings much more readily without our ego being so much in the way, without our fear status being so much in the way. And we also learned that we could deal with conflicts and emotional difficulties with others in a more compassionate, loving sense. And that the changes that occurred with MDMA psychotherapy, whether it was with couples with depression, I did with families, were enduring. People got married, a lot of them got divorced, but we would have to caution people not to do a lot of things during the bubble time. So MDMA as a process came to us then. We've since learned, and I want to make an earth-shattering neurocognitive, neuropsychological statement. So we know about amygdala downregulation, but here's the new theory. Amygdala downregulation is part of the reptilian brain. What does the reptilian brain really control? It controls fear, aggression, and it also creates the tone of mind. But the reptilian brain is fast like a reptile's tongue. And so what it can do is overwhelm our cortical capacities, which are slightly slower in milliseconds. So when we suppress the amygdala, we allow, with MDMA, our higher functions, our love functions, our control functions, our executive functions, to really process. So that's a lot of what we learned. That's just for beauty. So for me, two personal streams came together. The first was MDMA as a revolutionary psychotherapy. We had to be with people 4 to 6 hours or more, to be with people as long as they needed to. That meant that we exposed ourselves more as therapists, and that meant that we changed from the 50-minute hour, which was always repugnant to me. I always did a little more, at least 60 minutes, that's an hour. And so we had this revolutionary kind of capacity to be with people that was extraordinarily informed, and a lot of us came to love the work. We started out doing the work actually stoned, but that was too hard to sustain. And so we saw the genesis of what now is phase 2 going to phase 3 and hopefully legalization 2020-21. The second one was more personal. My son was diagnosed with leukemia in 1984. He died 4 years later. My mother died in 84. My brother-in-law came up with a brain tumor. A lot of difficult things happened, and MDMA formed a personal role in my life. And so these two streams came together when Rick asked us to do the study, asked me to do the study, and I was elated at the prospect to put together both the revolutionary aspect of MDMA and the aspect of working with people who are suffering. So that brings us to focusing on the trauma of a life-threatening illness with its potentiality of recurrence, relapse, and death, which is often creative of PTSD syndrome that may be subtle but lives inside us, breeds our mind, and is character-altering and intensely provoking of despair and anxiety in many people who suffer with this. Our phase 2 study is moving to its 18-subject completion. We're elated by the growth and development of people's lives and their liberation and freedom. We present an engaged and new awareness of the impact of illness, treatment, chronicity, and threat on those who have suffered, their families and communities. In other words, a systems view, both internal family systems and also a larger system view. I've talked about MDMA as an empathogen. So in terms of the experience of a life-threatening illness, beginning with diagnosis and followed by the various assaults on a person after that of surgery, radiation, chemo, sickness, etc., what the life-saving assault on the body does and on the psyche, it gives forth to us often vigilance, fear, helplessness, often hopefulness, as a strain, pain, suffering, fatigue, diminution of consciousness. It brings an awareness of death and cessation from the unacceptability and inconceivability of knowing that we are going to stop. We will cease. And that's difficult for almost all of us, especially as it brings up what comes after, hell, reincarnation, etc. It brings up the fear of relapse, recurrence, the trauma of illness, the trauma of treatment itself and how it subjugates us, what to do with remaining time and with whom to do it, leaving our mark, we're going too soon, the nature of my immortality comes up, and my relation to culture and people. There's the letting go of others, the loss of others, sometimes to our great sadness, and the connecting with others, making peace or not with our prospects, the letting go of aspirations, and the arising of aspirations and last-minute desires. There's the truncated sense of time, the limits on doing and being, and the strain on my tolerance for suffering, and the tolerance of my dear ones on suffering. Pleasure, desire, surrender, enough or not enough of this life ensue. And I won't run through all these. These are clusters, some of the sensitivities that arise and manifestations that you can call symptoms or signs. If we bulk them out, there's anxiety formations, a despair cluster, a change in loss of sexuality and pleasure in things, maybe a denial, perhaps often fatigue, inertia, and amotivation, dissociative states, a flight fantasy, often commitment to finding anything as a remedy that might work or usually doesn't work because they're far-flung and we've often run out of options, and the traumatic state with involuntary recollections, etc. So, I turn to my colleague and partner, Julane.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about being in the room and actually being a therapist with our participants. So how does one do psychotherapy for a life-threatening illness using MDMA? We very much believe that there are core elements that constitute a therapy container. Primary is safety. So creating safety through setting. The setting is, of course, the space. Safe, secure, the comfort. It's a peaceful place. The participants' needs are attended to. There's music, smells, color, gardens, life outside the window, and warmth in the room. So it's the nest, and the nest needs to be secure and stable. We also create safety through relationship. So taking time to really know our participant. This starts with preliminary sessions, which, yes, are full of measures and testing. That's our protocol, and the FDA requires that. But doing it in such a way that the person feels a genuine interest and concern on our part. These beginning sessions give a deep view into their events, trauma, illness, and family history. It is the time for us to explore and know their illness, their family, their past. So at the core of this work is the relationship established between three people. And Bruce and Marcella talked about this as well. I view it as a triangle. So a triangle is created, and it's composed of the participant and a male and female therapist. It has a magic to it. The presence of two therapists with a participant creates safety and energy and interest and movement resonating between all three. We share and disclose at times so that we are known as we want to know them. Letting them in to our life and knowing us helps establish a trust and openness. There's an element of time. MDMA therapy is unique in its gift of time. There is no hurry or rush. The sessions are at least 8 hours or more. So there's time to come back around to issues, to explore. If mistakes are made or something is missed, there's time to go back and revisit. Along with this is the concept of pendulation. It's one that we employ throughout our therapy. It's going into deep realms and then coming back, returning to the present and just being. We call it going in and out. And that coming out is just as important as going in. Our participants often, of course, have intention as they're going into their journey. And whatever their intention is, we know that that's not always what comes up. And so we just trust that whatever does come up needs to come up.
We need to go faster. We're running out of time.
Okay. So we're running out of time. So we also meet with families because that's very important, significant others. We have conversations and dialogue, and it's not always about what happened to them, their illness, their trauma. It's just conversation, and we trust those conversations go to where they need to go. We use music. We provide music that evokes dreaming, thoughtfulness, feeling, and setting a spiritual ambience. We use a beautiful gong that we have as the medicine is taking effect to stimulate reverie and a transition from ordinary mind. We use poetry, invocations, and we honor the work that's about to happen. We use breath work to center and to deepen. It's not all serious business. Along with processing and healing, we make time to laugh with our people, to have conversations about all they might be interested in. And most important, it's the delight. That part of the healing from MDMA is revering the delight in oneself that comes up during sessions. Feeling one's expansive breath, feeling euphoria, feeling happy, feeling calm or excited, feeling the mind move. And we anchor that physical state and emotional state with reminders to go back often, even when they're not with us, so they can drop into MDMA mind at any time.
We're going to go fast now. Some of this is, wow, our slide died. Where's our slide?
Okay.
Oh, okay, look at that. So this is basically the same structure that the other studies have had. Placebo-controlled study, but we don't have time to run through all the details.
So you can read the slide. The protocols are the same throughout all the MAPS studies. Our study had 18 people, 5 placebos. Everybody receives 3 MDMA sessions.
This is who qualifies. You can run it down. It's pretty much the same as for other studies.
The difference is that our people have a life-threatening illness, and a lot of people confuse that as to end of life, and ours is not an end-of-life study. Our people have been sick, and at this point in time when they come to us, they're healthy enough to be with us for 9 months to a year, or forever, we hope, and to tolerate MDMA.
This is the same schedule that Michael showed, and so we won't run through it. It's the intensity of the experience. So this is
our study site. So we're one of fairly unique in that our study site is in our home. This is our living room. The couch is made up into a bed. It's a very warm, healing room that most of our people have told us walking in, they relax, and coming back over and over again, they feel that energy. This is our people all across all the studies. They have to spend the night. They're with us 24 hours. So this is where, at our place, where they spend their night in a nice soothing room.
So I'm going to run through the next set of slides. They're really practitioner-oriented to go through what the understanding of life-threatening illness does to people, and we won't have time to really talk about each one, but they're clusters that I'm happy to provide people to think more clearly about what people experience with a life-threatening illness. It's an expanded view of the potential of the harmful effects of it and a framework for self-reflection examination with the goal of practitioner awareness, providing relief, clarity, and peace. So I'm just going to flick them through. Just look at them as clusters of what happens to people. Sorry for the rapidity.
We're okay in time.
We're not. So these are the negative aspects, but there are also great moments and positive emotions and changes that come unbidden or from practice, from working on the mind with MDMA psychotherapy as relief and relaxation, as realization of great love, gratitude, spaciousness, a sense of the sadness of the finitudes of life as a kind of divine sadness, a relaxation of being as recognition and acceptance of the terms of this life, a sense of awe and reality of awe and clarity about what we have lived through and how it's been for us. So how are we doing? Let's take a quick look at what we have. This is preliminary data. It's on 13 subjects, 4 placebos, and in this case, n equals 6, and 9 people who went through the MDMA experience. Our primary outcome measure is the state trait inventory. This is the trait. You can see that placebo people in green did very well with their 2 overnight sessions and long numbers of preliminary sessions. And the MDMA effect on the trait was good for both populations, but the difference between the placebo group and the MDMA group was hard to discern. That's probably because of these factors as a statistical note. So that's to be read very fast. For you good readers, no dyslexics allowed. And the BDI is profound. The Beck Depression Inventory changes are profound for both groups. You can see in this one that the depression index went to virtually 0 for both groups, and there was an improvement with MDMA for the placebo group. And that's the mean. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? That's like a beautiful thing. Elegant. And then our independent rater gets the same results, basically. Another beautiful slide. We can't wait till we get all 18 and all the measures. And look at that. Wow. That's a tribute to our people and the work they did. And then the death attitudes profile, pretty amazing, pretty amazing. And now we go to our patterns. What do we see from all this, Julane?
So it's interesting to look at the patterns. So we're doing 3 MDMA sessions, and what are the changes? What happens? So in my view, and Phil's view, we often see that the first session is about letting go of anxiety, of the unknown, of the experience itself. It's often not necessarily about revisiting their trauma or their illness, as one might think, but it goes backwards. It's what I call time travel. So people will often visit their life, their childhood, their parents, school, or other traumatic events, fears. And it's also visiting the good and joyful times. The second session often becomes more pointed to the trauma that still afflicts, the source of anxiety and depression. And then the third session is a coming together, seeing themselves in a different way, not trauma-oriented, but self-oriented, a remembering of who they are at their core, who they were before illness and sadness and trauma, that spirit that was always there and remains.
So, to conclude, our integration with our subjects as therapists has been profound and changed both of us in very deep and meaningful and I think lifelong ways. Makes me weep a bit. And while there is some sense of disappointment that we cannot go on, though we're thinking how we can do a group with our subjects over time, due to the restrictions of the study under financial and FDA rules. And we know there's more personal work to be done, but that's always true. There's also a great sense of gratitude at what has occurred. And from our point of view, and I think this is true for the other PTSD studies that MAPS has conducted, this has been the most intense, publicly funded psychotherapy experience of which we know. And we are so honored to have been part of this and to have had this incredible support. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil Wolfson. Julane Andries, thank you very, very much.
We have questions? Do we have any questions?
We are, let's check our timing.
We are what?
I guess we have time.
We have time?
We don't really have time for questions. Maybe one we could squeeze in, I think.
Do we have two?
We got about 3 minutes.
No one? Okay.
So let's
Thank
maximize our time. Who has a question
There
for
is-
Phil or Julane?
Here's a couple.
Sir. There we go. Come on up. Come on up. Thank you. Give us your first name, please.
Yeah, Zach Solomon from Chicago. Clearly, the therapy had profound effect in and of itself, comparing the placebo group and the control group. What aspect of the MDMA do you think really made any significant impact between placebo and the active group?
Well, one way to answer it is you have to have been there. So you can see once MDMA is being felt by the participant, the work becomes incredibly deep. I think the placebo effect is mostly the relationship. So it's establishing that relationship. Many of our people, one in particular, said after her first screening visit, she said, "I am better already." So it's that hope that helps, I think, people. Or that's why we're seeing such great results with placebo.
It's a key question, but I think it's statistically related to the nature of the assessment device, the trait itself. That's not sensitive at a certain point. So with other measures like the Beck, you see changes with MDMA more sensitively, or with DAP, and we have about 10 other measures we haven't had a chance to get analyzed. But I'm sure that will show that, and that we'll see those differences, be able to tell you about them.
And there was no clear peak experience achieved, if you would, for any of the subjects that correlated with their greater improvement?
There were many
many
peak experiences, but they would be in those lines. We'd have to.
You used a rating scale for some peak experience?
We have some of
quantification?
that. We don't have all of that.
Yeah,
MDMA is not a great peak experience drug like psilocybin or ketamine. Right. It's a therapy drug. It's the wonder of dialogic psychotherapy.
I get it. Thank you.
Thank you once again. Thank you very much, Phil and Julane. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your research. Extraordinary.